It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I am your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. So tonight we're doing a special show about a topic that came up online earlier in the week. And it's the story of the school shooter, about this school shooter back in 1979. I think her name was Deborah Spencer. Let me see what her name is here. Brenda Spencer. And she was the first school shooter back in 1979. And it's the topic that inspired the song I Don't Like Mondays by the Boomtown Rats. So just a lot of mysterious stuff going on there, a lot of weird conspiracy type topics going on with this. So I invited Nathan Lewinski, hey Nathan, are you there?
Hey Ed, yeah, I'm here.
Hey man, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the story.
I'm out of Buffalo, New York, and I'm actually I work in private investigation, but also I dabble in film and writing, and I research a lot of these just different stories that I find interesting, including this one, which found out about fairly recently, and I just like to dig deep into the stuff, and usually end up collecting a lot of information and notes and writing about it on my own, not publishing it or anything, but just kind of making myself more aware, I guess, as a lot of us are.
Okay, so let me think. Now, you're 33 years old, so when this story happened, you weren't even alive yet, right?
No, not alive.
Okay.
Definitely not.
See, I'm the same age as this girl. Okay? And so I was in high school in 1979. And I remember this story distinctly because my friend Billy Gardner, who was kind of a punk rocker type guy, they were playing the song, and he says, "You know what this song's about?" He goes, "There was a girl who took a rifle and started shooting these little kids at a school, across the street from her house. And when they asked her why she did it, she says, 'I don't like Mondays.'" And he goes, "And that's what the song's about." And I says, "Wow." Because at the time, the idea of a school shooter, someone taking a gun and going to a school and shooting little kids or teachers at a school was just unheard of, I don't think it had ever happened before. So before we get into that, though, what kind of investigations do you do?
Well, I myself, as maybe a lot of people, they always think it's like, cheating husbands or
right.
This sort of thing. But for the most part, it is a insurance type, workman's comp type investigations. And partly what I do is handle video and also background checks and that sort of thing. Basically, just as it is with some of these topics, just sort of digging up as much information about subjects as possible.
Yeah, you definitely do have an advantage when you're researching these stories if you have access to databases and stuff like that. So. Okay, let's get into this, man. Now, so give us an overview of the story of what happened here.
Okay. Without going into the background of it, just starting off with that day, 8:30 a.m., January 29th, 1979, Brenda Ann Spencer, small girl, 5'2", 85 to 90 pounds. Someone described her as a bar of soap, just tiny, tiny girl. And, the bell rings for everyone to go into this elementary school, and her house, she lives across the street. She didn't go to school that day. And when that bell rings, 8:30, kids are going in, parents are still dropping them off, and she just starts firing a .22 caliber rifle out of her window at the school, popping off shots for about 15 minutes. Not, it was a semi-automatic rifle, Ruger .22 caliber, and it's funny. Everyone hears .22 caliber, they almost think it's like a something that wouldn't even kill you. But that is, as I've often found, is the type of weapon that is used for, whether it's the CIA or whoever. They're going to assassinate somebody, they'll shoot them in the head with a .22 because the thing rattles around their brain. That takes care of business. But anyway, she fires off shots for about 15 minutes. And she wounds, after all is said and done, she wounds 9 people, kills 2. The principal, Martin Ragg, and the custodian, Michael Suker. Both those guys are in their 50s. And, wounds kids. No one, some critical, serious, somewhat in between. And then I guess for about 20 minutes she held down, didn't do anything. And then about 9 o'clock, as police officers were coming and SWAT team, that sort of thing, she started firing some more. And wounded one officer, 28-year-old officer, in the neck. And I think he hit another and almost killed a principal. It seemed, and actually, from other writings about the case, it seemed that she was targeting adults more so. She had something about, and people had talked about, she had this, she really wanted to kill a cop, like, from friends, or, she didn't have a lot of friends, but other kids at school. She talked about it. She was always kind of turned on by the idea of television and these cop shows. A popular show at the time, SWAT, which you probably remember.
Sure.
And
because SWAT was fairly new back around in 1979. The whole idea of the SWAT teams was brand new. And even when you look at those old pictures of the SWAT team guys back in those days compared to these guys you have nowadays with the helmets and the vest and with all this tear gas on their bodies all over the place. SWAT was just kind of guys who were just climbing around on ropes with rifles.
Actually, the only thing that differentiated them was just the, a little bit different color clothes. When I was watching this week, I was watching one of a documentary about it by a British documentarian or for British television, and they showed some news footage from the scene, and it was just guys in cargo pants and T-shirts running around with mustaches. There was no helmets or riot gear. The guys now, it looks like a crazy movie. It's like wild. These guys, and I know you've had plenty of people on your, show in the past and around these same circles. The police is like a military thing now. It's very different than it was back then.
Yeah, it's amazing, to live through the past 40 years, man. And to see how things have changed, it's just shocking. But that's what was so shocking about, because now we think of school shootings, it's common, but this was like the first one. In your research, did you find any before this?
Well, one of my friends online, he had even directed me to a book that was sort of was dissecting all the school shootings and that sort of thing. And what sets this one apart is that it's a mass shooting. I think there were cases, kid goes to school with a gun, might shoot at a teacher or another student, things that are more isolated.
Right.
And also, and as is the case, this is America, and, there are, the racial differences. Things will happen in inner city schools. They're not even a blip on the radar. Whereas this is a suburban, middle to upper class or upper middle class, neighborhood in school. So it's almost like one of those, oh, this can't happen here. This doesn't happen here. We're all very nice white people. No one shoots anyone. You know what I mean? And so that factor makes it even a bigger case, as a lot of that stuff is. I remember as a child, in Buffalo, New York here, there was a lot of stuff going on in school, in the inner city schools. There was a lot of violence and shootings. And then when, the Columbine stuff started to happen in the late 90s, then it was like a huge deal across the nation. And I was like, well, I remember on the news, this is what's happening in the inner city. Why, I was only a 10-year-old kid, 10 to 15. I was like, well, why wasn't that there? But, as you get older, you start to figure out how things work.
Yeah. So now, what do you think was the motivation behind this?
Obviously, I guess now what happened is a reporter in the area, they figured out where the shooting was coming from. They looked up the number and they called. They called the house. And this is where the quote, "I don't like Mondays," originally stems from. And, obviously it turned out to be the song, the Boomtown Rats, the Bob Geldof song that actually ended up being pretty popular, number one in Britain, I guess, at the time. But that seems like a very childish thing to say, right? It was, it almost seems like a throwaway comment, even though that's the thing that's focused on. If you look it up online, that's the quote. That's the thing that makes it famous in a lot of ways. But it doesn't seem that makes any sense. obviously it's got to be something a lot more deep-rooted. And in my research, it seems, that there's a lot of questions with the father and their relationship. And they said drugs, she said she might have, she was like high and intoxicated, but apparently toxicology reports came back negative for anything like that. And the arresting officers said that she didn't appear to be intoxicated in any way.
Well, did she have a history of using drugs? And I know there was alcohol bottles all over the house.
Yeah, well, that's what's said. Half empty alcohol bottles around the house. Although, as I dug a little bit deeper, as all this stuff goes, the exaggerations and the changing of the story throughout, it gets a little crazy. I think there might have even only been a half bottle of Southern Comfort there, not even multiple bottles. And even though she was known at the time to be, a truant kid, skipping school, and also dabbling in drugs, marijuana, and that sort of thing. Although she had boasted, perhaps later in probation or parole hearings, that she just mentioned like 5 drugs all at once, as if she was on LSD, PCP, and weed and alcohol all at once, and then started firing. And that kind of stuff just didn't make sense. I don't know if that was just a way, and I'll get into this later, some of the other things that she may have said as grasping at straws to get out of jail, type of thing. Just adding to the fact that, hey, I wasn't in the right state of mind. Let me out of jail. I've been here 20 years, that sort of thing.
Well, let me ask you this. What kind of defense did she put on? Did she plead guilty? What happened with that?
Well, actually, this is actually pretty interesting to me. And as I was digging, in preparation for talking to you, digging into some other stuff, at first she was going to say that, she was going to plead not guilty for reasons of insanity.
Right.
And, I guess her psychiatrist, the one that they had, had said that, that is something that, they were looking to do. But then right before that plea was going to come, the state had and this happened in San Diego, but they actually moved the trial to Orange County because of, just too much of a distraction, that sort of thing, I guess. But one of the people that the state brought in was this guy named Ronald Markman. I don't know. Have you ever heard of him?
No, but I bet he's going to turn up in other cases. Go ahead.
I guess he's turned up in every case in Southern California. Yeah. He's the guy that comes in to get a what did they say? Impartial assessment. But
okay.
For a lot of people that listen, and I'm sure and people who read books like maybe Dave McGowan's Program to Kill, they like to move these things along, get the guilty. They just streamline them to guilt just to get them in jail and to close cases. Yeah. So they don't want these things spreading. And that's pretty much what happened. She came in, they were going to go with the pleading not guilty by reason of insanity, and then she came in, pleaded guilty, calmly said, I shot the students, I killed those men. And then when she stated her name or her birth date, as she was telling them, I was born April 3rd, 1962, she started to cry. And that was just the end. There was no trial. I mean, it was basically just over then. Then they just deliberated on how long, what the sentence was going to be.
Right.
There was no real looking into it. And actually, we were talking about that day, and we were talking about the SWAT team. And, they had a standoff for about 6.5, 7 hours after. This whole thing didn't really wrap up until about 3:30. There was how should I say, the sheriff, the lead guy, he was, yelling at her with a microphone. They were trying to mess with her, trying to coax her out. She was going to say, I'm going to come out shooting. Now, these guys with the helmets nowadays, these super cops, they might have just ran in there and killed her in a second. I mean, who knows?
The tear gas, flashbangs, the whole deal, yeah.
Yeah, they just, who knows? They were just blowing up the whole house, and that has been, case closed. But they waited, and she did give it up. And one thing I found real interesting was they never really did any forensic searching at the school, looking for like the bullet holes or anything like that. There was nothing of that done. And I guess all they did is walk through the house for about 10 minutes, took a bunch of pictures, and left. They never, according to this one book called Does Anyone Like Mondays, which is pretty much a book all about the case. The author, who was real close to it, discusses how, they're only there 10, 15 minutes. They didn't search the father's van, which is apparently where she got most of the rounds. She was sitting on about 750 rounds of ammunition for the rifle. And even though they say there was only 40 shots, 36 casings they found in the house, and they said there'd probably be no more than 40. The father, he thought she must have shot a lot more because they only had about 500 left or so, and he knows that there was 750. So either she missed a lot, or it's hard to say. But one thing that they found interesting, they even I guess it was like a shrine to the Grim Reaper in the backyard of the house.
Get out of here.
Yeah, that's what I found in this book, which I was just sort of thumbing through this morning, and I was like, that is very odd. And when you look at this documentary, if anyone looks it up, it's just called I Hate Mondays, and if you look it up on YouTube, it's 6-part. It's broken up into 6 parts, and some good information from 2006. They actually interviewed the father, and you can see that he's kind of he's got shit all over the backyard. He's kind of a I don't know if you can say like a pack rat, but he didn't want them to go in the house. And at the time, during the interview, but then at the time of the shootings, it is sort of talked about that he didn't have a lot of furniture. It was almost kind of squalor.
Right, they were both sleeping on a mattress on the bed. They were sharing a mattress on the floor, right?
Well, yes. That all the reports say they're sharing one mattress. The mother said this, and it's cropped up in everything I've read. Even though he denied it, he said there was 2 separate mattresses in the bed. They shared a bedroom, but it was 2 separate. But that's where things start to get a little bit hairy as far as his background. And and he wasn't making terrible money or anything. It's not like he was a poor man, and he, from his own admission, he was a recovering alcoholic.
Right.
That's what he says, that he wasn't drinking. So when they said they found the alcohol, the Southern Comfort bottle, this sort of thing, that he was surprised it was there. He had no idea, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, at the time, he was living there alone with her. His older boy, who I think was 22 at the time, he was already gone, and he had another daughter as well with his first wife, who wasn't living there either. So they were there alone and living in squalor, quote unquote, even though he was making about $50,000 a year over at the San Diego State College.
Now, do we know any details about the divorce and the custody issues? Because that could have driven him to poverty easily. And even back in those days, he might have had to give her alimony.
Well, he did.
Right.
He did at first. They got divorced in 1972. So about 7 years before this, Brenda, she was only about 7. Or, no, well, let's see, 16. Yeah, so, 9 years old, whatever.
Okay.
And so they got the divorce, and he won custody of the kids. He says in the interview that he fought for them, although I guess something that a court could, in the custody battles of the time, if most of the kids want to go with the one, then they'll all go. The judge will just make the decision. Okay, he's not going to split up children.
All right.
They're not going to do that sort of thing. Even though in this case, the kids were older. The 2 older kids, and it is kind of strange. He was making $50,000 a year in today's money. It was less. That's translated to today's money. So not great money, but definitely okay money. And at the time, I know things were a little bit cheaper. And the wife was an accountant. She did like her own private accounting business. Dot was her name. And she was making a lot less money, like half, maybe even less than half of that. And she lost the kids, but he was paying her alimony,
right,
which he got out of a year later. In 1973, he petitioned to get out of it, probably because he's the one taking care of the children. He's got 3 kids. Why is he paying her money? She's just living on her own. It's probably, and I think he did win that. He wasn't paying her any more money.
Well, believe it or not, back in those days, you had to pay alimony. Even if the wife made money and earned money. And what would the big change would be is if the ex-wife would have remarried or had a live-in boyfriend or something like that. That would be the grounds to get out of alimony. Things were so different back then, you can't imagine. Okay, it was just a whole different world, man. as far as that kind of stuff went. And so it was very unusual for a man to get custody of the kids back in those days, especially like a 9-year-old girl.
Yeah, well, 3 kids, all 3 of them.
Yeah.
And I guess, whether it's and that is strange. I did find that to be strange, although there is talk that the mother was a little bit aloof, or, maybe that's not the right word, but, not as attentive to the children as maybe she should have been. But for whatever reason, the judge brings the children into the chambers alone, and they discussed it, and they wanted to go with the father.
Wow.
Who knows? Maybe he just was more lax, and they could just do whatever they wanted. I mean, that often happens. I mean, if you're 15, you want to go with the cool parent. That's sort of what
sleep on the mattress on the floor. But now she was a troubled kid, and she was suicidal before this.
Yeah, what's funny is, interesting. She actually shot out the windows of that school the summer prior. She took a BB gun, she shot the windows out. She had to get psychologically evaluated. They just months prior, the evaluation told the father that, hey, this girl is, depressed. She is suicidal. Said that right to him. In the recent interviews, he kind of denies that he would even know what that means. And at the time, I guess he just he didn't even really care. He just kind of moved along. I guess, the wife describes him as a loner, someone that doesn't want to be bothered by other people. And that does kind of fall hand in hand with that part of it, because a lot of people, just like people don't want to go to the doctor, they don't want to listen to other people telling them how to live their life.
Right.
So, but he took her out shooting. They used to go to the hills around San Diego, go shooting. And for Christmas, a month prior, he bought her this .22 caliber rifle that she shot up a school with. And according to the information, she asked for a radio. He bought her a gun, and she thought that he wanted her to kill herself, even though by his admission, his quote is that they were best friends. This is at least what he projected. Not everyone's going to tell the truth out there in public.
Yeah, but even at that time, you got a suicidal kid, finally going to buy a rifle. But to buy 400 to 700 rounds of ammunition is like, did anybody ask him why he did that?
Well, I guess, what happened was they had gone out shooting this prior weekend, beforehand. And, he just had that in his car. And I guess she was going to stay home from school, and she asked to go into the van or get the keys to the van. And I guess she snuck out the ammunition. That's kind of the way it's worded in this one write-up, the book I mentioned before.
Right.
So it's not like she just it's not like she had a drawer and that was her own personal stash of ammunition. Although it does seem that, that's what they're into. They liked shooting, so she had full access to some of that. I guess they only had handguns in the house besides. And even though, if anyone cares to search around a little bit, you'll find some grossly exaggerated stuff about a garage full of, like, an arsenal in the garage, which I don't know where they'd even have gotten that from, because the police themselves, they did not search the home. So that's clearly a lie. Whoever wrote that online or in their books, that's falsified.
That's fascinating, but consider if the guy was borderline poverty, it's a strange priority to invest so much of your money in ammunition.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we all have our hobbies.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Some of us like to eat or sleep on a bed instead of on the floor, as a hobby. Oh my God, what a crazy story.
I mean, I know San Diego is an expensive place to live. I know now, certainly nowadays. I'm not sure how that equates to back then. I mean, everything is so much different. Everything, costs so much different. This cost of living and that sort of thing. But I really just can't wrap my mind around why he was so impoverished or appeared to be so. If he's not an alcoholic, at least that's what he claimed. Because usually that kind of money goes towards drugs. Whenever you see somebody and you can't tell where all their money's going, but they don't have anything, they don't have a pot to piss in. Right. You say, oh, well, is he gambling? Is he doing that sort of thing? I have not figure that part out of it yet. So, with that, I am a little bit confused as to what his situation is to that regard. And that the house is still in the family name now. And I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit. But he stayed there, and, that's that. In fact, 24 hours later, they had school all up and running. I know nowadays they'd have a candlelight vigil for a whole month probably, but 24 hours later, he was outside on his driveway looking at the kids going to the school where his daughter just shot everyone up.
Well, he still had a bunch of guns in the house, too.
Yeah, which apparently isn't worth it for anyone to go searching. It's obviously not his fault that his daughter did that at all.
Wow. What a different world.
Yeah, well, that's why I always wondered, like, if this was me and let's say one of my kids got injured, or if it was my spouse who got killed, like the principal, his wife, and that sort of thing, man, I'd be suing that father into the ground. Like, he'd be done. And even if I didn't do that, someone else will. There'd be a class action lawsuit against this guy and manslaughter or something. That he just walked away without any problems for himself is a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah, right. That is okay. That's interesting too. There's no lawsuits, no nothing. Right? He still owns the house. Oh boy. Okay. Now, when does the song come about? Bob Geldof. When does he insert himself into this thing?
Well, now the Bob Geldof stuff was apparently he was in Los Angeles at the time, and while he was doing a radio show, that over the ticker, this story came out. Whether it was the next day or that day, somehow he got wind of that "I Hate Mondays" quote, and he wrote the song shortly after, and Bob Geldof has some, he rubs shoulders with the elitist crowd of the world, really, with his quote unquote charitable works and that sort of thing. And a lot of people probably, I know for myself, I didn't even realize who he was at all, except that he's in Pink Floyd The Wall, the movie. He stars in that. But he wrote that song shortly after, and one of the probably the most interesting line is the very first line of the song, where it says the silicon chip in her head went to overload.
Right, got switched to overload, yeah.
And, and I'm sure people who listen and everyone that's sort of circling these topics, I mean, when it comes to mind control activities and that sort of thing, it just kind of makes you wonder, like, what caused him to tap into that? I mean, I guess it is kind of an interesting quote, and I can see artistically, if you want to look at it objectively, hey, that's interesting. I could see someone writing a song about it, sure. But, it certainly took off, made it more popular. In fact, I guess she wrote him saying that after she gets out of jail, she'd like to meet him and thank him for adding to her popularity.
Let me ask you a question. When were silicon chips invented?
Oh, geez, I don't even know.
You know what I mean? Because I cannot imagine that they were in. Oh no, wait, sometime in 1947. Okay. Okay, I thought I caught into it. Yeah, I thought I caught something there. Okay, let's take a little commercial break. Okay, and we'll get back. We'll get into more about the Bob Geldof and his kid. How old was Peaches when she died? I
think she was 22.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, and in fact, in the song, he mentions the character in the song, sort of based on Spencer, as being not so peachy keen.
Oh, that's right.
Also interesting.
Whoa. Okay, we'll take a break at that point there. We'll a little commercial message here, and we'll be right back with more of Nathan Lewinski, private investigator, researcher, and a fascinating guy. Did a lot of research on this I Don't Like Mondays story. We'll be right back after this.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Show's brought to you by Audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/Opperman Report. We're here today with Nathan Lewinski. He's a private investigator from Buffalo, New York. And we're talking about this Buffalo, right?
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, and we're talking about this Brenda Spencer case. This one of the first school shooters there ever was in 1979. She was a girl who did it. Now, she was a lesbian as well, right?
Certainly a lesbian now, claims to have been born a lesbian. And I'm not sure if that came out, while she was in jail. I think it came out in one of her first parole hearings in the 90s, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting, because back in 79, if she had been a lesbian, that would have been front page news too, that the school shooter was a lesbian, it would have been a big deal. Really, because think of that movie with Al Pacino, where the gay guy robbed the bank. It was big news. He was gay when he did it, Yeah,
that did not get brought up. I actually poured over a lot of. I find with any of this stuff, it's real good to check out the newspaper articles around the time.
Right.
You get some sort of throwaway stuff. Little things that maybe people don't focus on after the fact, but at the time, you see some interesting things. But it just didn't come up. There was nothing like that. I think she didn't have a lot of friends, but one of her best friends was a boy, and she was always described as like a tomboy type. And but then again, she definitely seems to be troubled. And I know we spoke about her, not taking the not guilty plea as far as insanity, but she's certainly a disturbed woman. Disturbed person, and I'm sure 20 years of being in jail, that'll help out your lesbianism a little bit.
Yeah, location.
Right.
Now, what about
that kind of gets into the idea of the that stuff with the father. Now, in 2001, she claimed that was the first time she had said this, that she claimed that he was abusive sexually, and that may have played into, sort of her psychological downward spiral as it is.
Okay, that would make sense. And then we have another indicator because her father married her cellmate?
Yeah, and I know that me and you had a short discussion about this earlier in the week about how this is, it happens, it happens fairly often, because there's a connection there with someone, whether they visit or, like you said, making calls through another, like your cellmate's family member, and there becomes this sort of a friendship can sort of blossom there. But before she got moved into an adult prison, she was in a juvenile detention center, and the cellmate that she was with, Sheila McCoy, who was actually a little bit younger than, now this is where it gets a little weird. I kind of had to piece this together a little bit later. So this girl is a little bit younger, but I guess looked a lot like Brenda, the red hair and the whole bit. And so when she gets out, she was put to a halfway house, and she ran away from there and ran to Wally Spencer's house, which was still across the street from that school, lived with him, ended up getting impregnated by him, and then they got married shortly thereafter. And then as soon as she gave birth, or very shortly after she gives birth, she runs away from him, abandoning her daughter with Wally, with Brenda's father. And then he has raised her ever since in that house where she still lives.
Right.
And actually, her name is, if it's fine to say her name,
her first
name.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Her name is Bree, which at first I didn't think about it. I was like, hey, that's like Brenda. That's almost the exact same name.
Yeah.
And she might even have looked a little bit like her. Her mother resembled her. Who knows? It's almost that also seemed very strange. And when I looked it up online, the address and everything, it still lists her as as the resident of that house. Now, as far as him being there, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, I think he's alive. I really was hunting down his obituary or a possibility thereof, but he was born in 1929, so he's fairly old.
Yeah, he'd be up there. But now, how old is the daughter now?
Well, she's got to be about 35.
About 35 years old, still living in that house. That's very interesting.
Yeah, went to university, studied sociology. I guess fairly. I wouldn't say fairly successful. I mean, I can't really speak on that part of it, but to be able to make it through and go to college, I mean, that's you're doing okay. I mean, you've made it that far. But, it makes me wonder now, when he married Brenda Spencer's mother in the 50s, she was 19 and he was 25.
Okay.
And then, I guess in the one interview with the mother, she said that she suspected that she thought that there could be something going on between him and Brenda.
Right.
She didn't really say anything, but she thought that could have been a possibility. And, obviously there's a lot of mental problems. People do have, things going on with their mind naturally, but all the stuff that, we're seeing in this case, to shoot other people and to do these do these crazy things, and to be in that depressive state, and the way that he acts, it doesn't seem too far-fetched that could have been the case.
Right. And right, definitely. And even the fact that he would buy a home across the street from a school, maybe his attentions were directed toward little kids,
Well, yes, that is certainly questionable. When he's asked by the British documentarian how this happened, that how did it happen that he married his daughter's cellmate?
Yeah.
He just said, he's like, I'm not going to talk about that. He's like, we're not going to speak on that. So this guy who, by his ex-wife's stating that he was a loner, didn't really like to talk to people, he was, able to coerce this young girl into coming to his house. Now, whether it was going to be a sexual relationship before she got there, or he impregnated, who knows? A lot of things that you could say, well, maybe she ran away from him because he got her pregnant and she just didn't get an abortion and then he kept the child. It's very odd when those things are coming up. And I actually, for those people who have looked into these, obviously on your show, stuff about like these pedophilia rings and whether it's sex trafficking and the video element of that, and as far as pornography goes, this guy at the time was an audio-visual technician, something that
okay.
People didn't just use camcorders back then. It wasn't a regular thing, and it makes you wonder, what kind of stuff could he possibly been involved with. And in addition, one of the things I read was that it seemed very clear that she was looking to assassinate that principal across the street. Like, she had it out for him, because apparently she was a marksman, very good. He said it. Many people have said she's a very good shot, yet she didn't really kill anyone except that principal. She got him. And then the custodian that went to help him, at least that's the story, that he ran out there to try to help him. But she made sure to get him. It always makes you wonder whenever you read about these stories, they make it seem like the killings are random, and then you see that there's certain connections that would lead one to believe that maybe the killings aren't so random.
Very interesting. Very interesting. It's slipped my mind. I was going to ask you a couple of things. One thing, do we know what the value of that house is today, roughly?
I don't know the value of the house now. I'd have to get like a zestimate.
Okay, and when you say that he lured her and he convinced her to come to, do you have some indication of that, or maybe she just left, she ran away and she had no place to go. She says, "Hey, I know this guy. I'll go to his house."
Yeah, I guess. Well, that is true. You have to know the address, and if you're the cellmate, if I'm in jail and I'm with my cellmate and we're real close and he's writing letters to his family, I would know the address. So maybe, and apparently he visited her every Saturday since she was locked up. So that would mean that, this happened in 1980, so that would mean, not the incident, but that, the other girl running away and that sort of thing. So for a year, he was visiting. So it's very possible that he had met her, and every institution has different situations as far as the visiting. It's not always a glass wall with a little phone. Sometimes you're in a big room, everyone's there together, so it's hard to say.
Now, what about this? You described an effigy to the Grim Reaper in the backyard.
Yeah, that was just, that's all that was said of it. That there was, and when you see the interview on YouTube, his, like I said, there's some stuff, there's sort of like crap all over. It's not like a nicely landscaped yard with, things put in certain places in a regular way. It's just kind of stuff scattered. And I could see, maybe that was something that she did. Apparently there's some sort of tie-in with Alice Cooper, even, that she was big on the Alice Cooper, and that might have been, now she had never said this, and it doesn't come up too much, but I know in the one book I had mentioned and a couple other things that she was heavy into the Alice Cooper, and some people in her school would say, oh yeah, that might have had an effect, and she's inspired by him in some way.
That was right around that time with the satanic lyrics and stuff like that was getting a lot of publicity. And is it affecting kids? Is it motivating kids? It was right around 1980 and 81. That's interesting too. Now, Bob Geldof. Besides Bob Geldof taking this story and publicizing it and popularizing it, really, we wouldn't even know about it,
Yeah, the way I stumbled upon it, just seeing a picture of this girl and someone saying a caption, mass shooter Brenda Spencer. And I was like, oh, well, that's something I need to be reading about. Yeah. There's this little girl shooting kids. That's obviously of some interest. It could keep me busy for at least a few minutes. Who knew it would be a whole week? But, yeah. And it's also in the Breakfast Club, scratched on the wall or written on the wall in the movie The Breakfast Club. It says, I hate Mondays. And that was only about 5 years after. And if anyone knows the way movies work, those things take a couple of years to develop. A year to actually, from start of the shoot to when it goes out in the theater. So, that was certainly part of the pop culture at the time that movie was getting made and the idea was out there. So, and I wish I won't even speak on that, but that Christopher Columbus, the guy that wrote and directed that, I think there's, I don't know. He had some, there was some oddball connections to him when I was sort of looking around a bit, but that wasn't this week. That was something else. I won't speak on that because I don't have all the details in front of me anyway. But, yeah, and, Bob Geldof himself, I just don't know. It certainly wasn't something that happened before. It was definitely after the fact. And, people who look into this sort, they look into popular music for, like, certain types of symbolism, or they're looking for, like people talk about that, the sort of mind control or mind manipulation. And they see him with the black and white checkered shirt, and that's sort of supposed to be some sort of trigger. Depends on, who you talk to. People sort of look into that a little bit. And I don't know if it makes me wonder. People like to have ideas that, these are planned events to initiate some sort of result. In this case, I can only think of the result being whether there be more school shootings or the fact that she was tried as an adult. And I've read elsewhere where this whole idea of getting children to be tried as adults is sort of like it's sort of like a thing that has been, over the past 20, 30 years has been more of a regular occurrence, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Back in 79, the idea of getting in trouble and thinking that you go to adult prison, unheard of. I was the same age as her. So she probably assumed, oh, yeah, I'll go to juvie for a few years and I'll get out. I'll be out of this in 5-6 years, Which, again, too, it's not like the school shooting was such a big deal back then. Also, too, The Breakfast Club, John Hughes, the director, directed a whole slew of teen movies back around that time that were...
That's his name, John Hughes. Sorry, yeah. Wrong name. I said Christopher Columbus, I think. Oh. I know the two, they kind of get grouped together, but yeah, all right.
Yeah, he really shaped a generation of, this is how teenagers supposed to behave and act. This is what, people who watched that stuff thought it was very impressive in your life. So the guy had a lot of influence over the culture back at that time, huge amount of influence. Because it was my age growing up.
Yeah, and, I remember, I know I'm a little bit older, but, it's still a lot of that high school stuff, it still holds true. I mean, the themes are the same, and people getting broken up into these different groups, classifying kids. And when I saw that movie for the first time, I watched it multiple times, almost as if I was entranced by it for a few days. multiple viewings in a row the first time, and then seeing it over a period of days. I had the tape, from Blockbuster or whatever, and watching it over and over. And I mean, I was just, maybe when you're a kid you do that more often, but it makes you think, is there something to that? Whether it's kids listening to records 1,000 times in a row or watching a movie 100 times in a row, what the hell are they doing? Maybe they shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, that's the truth. But also, too, that's when HBO first started. And they used to play those John Hughes movies on HBO, like, twice a day, 8 times a week, So, yeah, you're right. It was over and over. And I've seen every one of those movies to this day. I've probably seen about 30, 40 times. Yeah, and
isn't there a thinking about, they always talk about trying to dumb down society, whether you're going to talk about people, with the fluoride in the water or whatever topic people are trying to talk about. But this whole idea of sort of dumbing people down and dumbing kids down, and, for her to say, I hate Mondays, it makes you either afraid of school, is there like a fear element involved there, or is there just like this idea like, hey, school sucks? I mean, that was kind of the Alice Cooper thing, right?
School's out for the summer.
I hate it, whatever.
Yeah, there was the whole music too, like 18, Half Boy, Half Man, all that kind of music. Now, let's get into. We don't have too much time left. Let's get into the whole Geldorf thing, because what the hell? Where does this guy come from? How does he suddenly become? What's his charity? Live Aid? Which one does he do?
Yeah, I think he does. Yeah, Live Aid. That's true, and he did that in the early '80s, and then I think he rekindled it recently. It actually kind of makes you wonder here we are working stiffs, and this guy who had a couple songs that just throwaway songs and in one movie, and then has a charitable event once every 15, 20 years.
What song did he have in his movie? What movie?
Well, just that Pink Floyd movie. He starred in that, so that's his, and that's part of his fame to be in Pink Floyd The Wall. He played the main character,
okay.
Which, as anyone knows, in that movie, he's a drug-induced rocker who ends up being almost like a Hitler-type figure, if you recall.
No, I don't recall. I don't remember seeing it. I don't think I've ever.
Oh, you've never seen it? Oh,
I don't think I did.
He's a dictator, and there's the two hammers that's sort of like the swastika, and he's running around yelling at people to kill people in the streets, and it's like a wild, the whole thing. And then if you think about Pink Floyd and you get the tie-in with the Wizard of Oz and that
right.
Dark Side of the Moon thing, it starts to get the wheels churning and that sort of stuff. But Geldorf seems to have this like place in the elitist community, and I don't know as much about it, and I know you can look around a bunch, but as far as that, his daughter, you mentioned her before, she had died of a heroin overdose quite recently, and I think it was just, just last year, just a year ago, and there was talk of her, and I think her husband at the time, he's involved in some of this occult stuff, and they talk about the sex trafficking and this sort of thing. So I'm not sure where he fits in there. I really don't know. But it's certainly something to look into more. And he had like meetings with Bill Clinton
right
some time ago, and I know, when you start connecting the dots with the Clinton and the Epstein, like he had that show about a month ago or so.
Yeah.
It just sort of makes you wonder, well, hey, is he on one of those planes? Is this one of those guys? And, how does he play into the shaping of our reality?
Now, but Bob Geldorf, too, wasn't there something with him? He was like in a love triangle, that there was a suicide, a hanging in a closet or something like that?
I don't know.
Another band member or something like that? Let me see if I can find it.
I know, I see your keys going.
Yeah. No, I can't find it. No, it's all everything he talks about his daughter. But I almost remember that there was oh, you know what? This is very interesting too. He married his girlfriend right after the death of his daughter.
Right after?
Yeah.
He didn't put a hold on that one?
Doesn't seem that. It says Bob Geldorf to wed girlfriend Jean Marie following death of daughter.
Yeah, and and they always talk about those with suicide. I know even like on your show last night talking about that, Craig Spence, and whenever you hear suicide, it's just kind of, is it a way just to sort of clean things up, or is it one of those things, as I think as that Nick Bryant had mentioned, it's the choice, either take yourself out or you're done. So and that's kind of stuff. I know it's a lot of conjecture, but it's always you start putting all the other puzzle pieces around it, and then you say, wait, this part of it doesn't make sense. Well, I do see something here. There's okay, I see. The daughter, that's what I remember. Because when this happened last year, there was, it was all the buzz. And at that point, I probably could talk about more. But, yeah, she's both being part of that OTO.
Right.
Like a she had the tattoo on her wrist, like a little heart, and had the OTO in the middle.
Yeah, she was a follower of Crowley. And, had a tattoo on her neck, I think it was. And she was even tweeting about all that kind of stuff. And the books all over her house, they showed, photo shoots with her. And in the background was all these OTO books and stuff like that, all kinds of bizarre stuff with that kid.
Yeah, and that stuff runs to, obviously, Crowley is he's obviously British and that sort of thing, but any of those British rockers, I mean, they definitely get into that. I'm seeing a picture of Geldof at the head of a table with George W. Bush.
Oh, really? See? Yeah.
In there. And, I guess there's a sort of a whole thought about mysterious deaths being sort of cross-linked with Geldof here and there.
Okay, here it is. But I got the In Excess singer's suicide blamed on Bob Geldof. Michael Hutchins' girlfriend is blaming his death on a dispute with her ex-husband, Bob Geldof. Right, and the mother of Peaches, this Paula Yates, she died of a heroin overdose. 14 years before. Yeah, the Hutchins, he hung himself. Right. Yeah, I knew there was some kind of hang going on in this whole thing with Geldof. Somebody was hung. Hey, he's an odd guy. Let's face it. Yeah, and he's a knight. He's Sir Bob Geldof. Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, knighted at 34, which he's got to be 60. So that maybe it was sort of shortly after that Live Aid. And it makes you wonder that. Now, I don't know if you've had a lot of anyone talk about charities on your show or that sort of thing, but those types of things are raising all this money, yet I still don't see anything really changing in the way the world works. Yeah. And I hear about Red Cross having like a surplus of $60 million, and people, the people who run those organizations are, quite well to do. And, if he was knighted when he was 34, what year would that even be? I mean, that would be 1985, right about the year of Breakfast Club. Whatchamacallit, Breakfast Club, and 1 year after that, what was it? I'm not sure when that Live Aid was. But, right around that. Live Aid was 82, maybe? Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. Actually, might have been 1985 as well. And when you look at the, we raised all this money after 9/11. We built the whole Department of Homeland Security, all this. Then we have Hurricane Katrina, and we can't even get a bottle of water to these people dying on a bridge. So all that money was stolen, obviously, And then you got, after that, when you see Bush and Clinton sitting there, we want to raise money for this typhoon, this hurricane over here. Just send money. Just send cash. Look at this. Send cash. Yeah, or even those Boston bombings you have. I know that Dave McGowan's right up on it. Talks about how within a day, sophisticated websites for you to donate to these people, and we're raising hundreds of thousands of dollars within hours. And then people wonder, well, hey, what's the motivation to lie about this sort of thing? Why would they do such a thing? Even though they're walking away, it's like $1 million. Well, it's pretty clear what the motivation would be. People are taken care of for the rest of their life if they're involved in these events. And when they do these charitable works, they're in Africa. It makes you wonder, well, what are they? Not only where are they funneling that money to, but also what are they kind of? What's the misdirection? We're staring at this. What's happening behind the scenes. When there's charities here in this country and we see that nothing ever gets done with the money, it all just, gets used up. When it goes overseas, like when there's that big earthquake in India and we donate, nothing happens over there. Forget it. Yeah, nothing's going to change over there in 30 years. But it's off the news, so people don't pay attention anymore. Because even today, Haiti's still a mess. Half of Haiti has no electricity since the earthquakes back, I guess, 5-7 years ago. You know, and so
yeah, I mean, well, hey, I mean, Sean Penn was over there. I guess he just couldn't do it all himself. Just kind of that's all he could muster up. But it's funny you mentioned that, and I don't know how much time we have, but sometimes you get in a lot of debates with people, usually online, because people like to get all fired up when you're not looking at them straight in the face. But this one guy, he was a military guy, and he was talking about what the U.S. military does for people around the country, around the world, I should say. And he was talking about being stationed in Haiti and all the good things they had done there, even though the place is still a shithole. And I remember telling him, I was like, hey, I know that you believe in your country and you're out there and you did do a good thing. Hey, maybe you are a better man than me. You're out there feeding these poor kids. But I mean, don't you see that you're out there cleaning up the mess, or not even cleaning up, just kind of like putting a very temporary Band-Aid on a mess that was perpetrated by these super rich, elitist, private jet, sex trafficking people out there who just are using you as a weapon to fight their bad, for a greed, a weapon to perpetuate their greed around the world. And it sort of saddens me that people they're not seeing that. They're not seeing that.
I hear you, man. People are just they're bought and sold a bill of goods, and they're willing to march right into their grave. They don't want to believe for a second that their dream could not be true. Just horrifying,
for sure.
Okay, so we got like we're pretty much done. Do you have anything you want to leave the audience with? The parting.
Yeah, I guess I could just say that with a case like this, Brenda Spencer, I think that there's a lot of oddities, and especially when it comes to the father, I think that his role, whether it's in sort of molding her mindset or taking responsibility for her actions, or I guess if you take out all the conspiracy stuff and what could have happened or not, there's still got to be. I mean, that was a child who did this, and at some point you got to say, well, where do the parents come into it? When are they going to be taken to task? And his background's a little shady. If he wasn't an abuser, I don't know. And I know San Diego is a big military town, and
right.
There's a lot of talk, whether it's especially during in the 70s. In fact, I think his college has a very special write-up on like the Jonestown massacre. I know one San Diego university I was kind of looking into because I was trying to find connections between him. Did he have a military background? I know one pic, even though he has long hair throughout the 70s, he had a very military crew cut in the 60s. And there's just nothing about him. That's one of the reasons I tried finding an obituary about him, because I know they always mention that. But, I think that's just one of those things that they just kind of streamlined this little girl to get 25 to life. And, it sort of just shaped the way that kids were looked at, as adults, which I just can't agree with that. She clearly had problems and clearly was affected by her situation.
Yeah, if we can't get a hold of Brenda in prison, maybe we can get a hold of her half-sister there, living there in the house, and see what she has to say about you never know until you call.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if you want, I do have the phone number.
Shoot it over. Why not? Let's get her on the line right now. Okay, Nathan Lewinski, thank you so much, brother. I know it was kind of last minute. We said, hey, let's put the show together. So thank you very, very much for all the research you've done. I know the audience appreciates it a lot. And we'll be seeing you in the future. I know you want to talk about done a lot of research on Hitler and stuff like that. So hopefully we can do a second show in the future.
Sounds good. I do look forward to it, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Yep, have a good one.